is Bill Trail. I'm with the Elkhart Model Railroad Club, and this is the clinic at the club. And today I am going to be going over the basics of AnyRail, what it is, and planning your layout with it. So I guess initially, I've been model railroading, for 50 years now. So I guess I've always been designing a railroad. I don't know how many of you guys are designing a layout right now. More than one of you, probably, yeah. It's kind of like from the time I opened my first Tyco railroad kit, I've been putting pieces of track together. And I started using the computer to do it probably about 20 years ago when Atlas came out with that. They had a free software to put the snap track together, and that was pretty cool. That was about 20 years ago. When I got back into the hobby, about 10 years ago, I went to look for that free software, and I had a hard time finding it, but I found a bunch of other design programs out there. And AnyRail was the one that I went to because it was very, very intuitive for me. I'll throw it up on screen here for us. It was very intuitive for me. It had, I would say, probably the best graphics I could find, at the time. They have a really good free version of the software, so you can download this software onto your PC computer, Windows computer, and you can design a layout, for free, basically. I think they limit you to about 50 pieces of track, and it gets a little bit old stopping at 50 pieces because if you're like me, there's never enough track to design a layout. The other thing, it was really pretty inexpensive. I decided to go ahead and pay for the version of software. For 8 years ago, it was $50 is all I paid. They update this thing almost every time I open it. There's a new update, and I started with version 5, and now it's in version 6.5, 5.1 or 51 version. I mean, it's always updated. And I've never run into a bug with it, so I don't know what all they're fixing. They just keep adding track and pieces and things like that. But what's really cool about it is you can literally, like it says, AnyRail, you can literally use just about any type of track that's out there. Atlas, Pico, and I'll show you that in a second. But it really turned out to be the most flexible software I could find too. I could set it up for all of my different preferences as well. So I guess with that kind of introduction, what I'm going to show you today, what I'm not going to show you today, there's so many tools in this software, it's amazing. I'm not going to get into the layering tool, which you see here, but a little bit earlier, Chuck kind of mentioned doing bench work, but layering is just the ability to build, like your bench work at one layer, and then on top of that, put your track plan and scenery above that. We're not going to get into the helix tool. You can create a helix on this and it'll do all the calculations for you. We're not going to get into the slopes and the grades and things like that. But as you see in some of the plans I show you I've developed over the years, you'll see that those tools are very useful for figuring things out when you get into a complicated layout. So let's just get into it. What I'm going to do for the clinic is I'm going to actually design a 4x8 layout, an HO scale layout. And so the first thing, let's look at the settings. Remember, I told you it was very flexible. You can get very, very precise with how you want to measure. You can use metric, decimal. You can use fractional units, English fractional units. You could even get up to a 1/64th of an inch precision in your design. So it can be very, very tight design, very specific. As far as the workspace here, I have it set up right now for a 4x8 sheet of plywood, but you might choose to maybe set this to be the dimensions of your room just by changing the numbers here. So if you have a 12-foot wide room, you could change the dimensions of your room, to match it that way. But for this demonstration, I'm just going to keep it the size of a sheet of plywood, so 96. So again, very flexible as far as setting up this background grid. your tolerances, so you could have it check if your flex track that you stretch is too long. You could have it check for a certain minimum radius of curve as you're designing. So there's a lot of things to make it work exactly the way you do. So we've got the 4x8 set up. The next thing I'm going to do is I'll go to my home screen here and I'll blow this up a little bit. So what we're going to do, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to select a track library. Remember I told you you could use virtually any type of track. What I have this set up to do, I have it set up for HO scale track or N scale because I actually designed both types of layouts. You could do this with a G scale, Z scale, double O, G. So really anything that you want to design with it, it's all in the program. I use Atlas track a lot, but here at the club we tend to use, at least for the last couple of projects, I've used Pico Streamline Code 100. So I'm going to open up that track library. Even with some of these tools and the menu of tracks, there's a lot of flexibility. So for example, I know when Chuck talks about the N scale turnouts, he always talks about the part numbers. I don't remember them by part numbers, but you know, here with Pico you can pick an SL 85 or an SL 88 turnout. I prefer to use the descriptions, which is just a little easier for me to understand. So there's a lot of you can run this to your preference, basically. Okay, so that's selecting the track. One thing that always amazed me about working with track is the different geometry, track geometry. The track in AnyRail is very precise. So when you work with it's exactly what you're going to get out of the box. What's also interesting is when you mix different brands of track, you'll find out very quickly that a code, a number 4 turnout for Atlas might not fit up to a similar turnout in Pico very easily. So it's just something that's very interesting in working with track. And there are options to actually mix and match track brands in the program if you want to. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do now, I told you that we're working on a 4x8 layout. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the tabletop in place. So I'm going to insert that right now on the screen, and it's really simple. It's just a matter of adding a shape, a rectangle, to my workspace. And since it's a 4x8 sheet of plywood, I will type in the dimensions for 4x8. And so this is the piece. This is my baseboard basically. Now in AnyRail, you can do really cool things with these shapes. You can fill them with different colors. You can lighten them up so you can see through them. You can actually put them into the background. And in this particular case, since it's going to be our tabletop, I'm going to designate it as the tabletop. Another cool thing you can do is you can add. You can move these shapes around. You could add points. Oops, excuse me, I did the wrong thing there. You could add points to your shape and move them around and create all kinds of crazy things if you want to. But here in this case, what we're just going to do is we're going to use the plywood, and we're going to go ahead and round off the corners. Let me select the whole thing. We're going to round off the corners of it. Well, guess we'll do that later. Never fails, right? So that's basically the first thing we do is we add the baseboard, the plywood baseboard. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and start working with the track and build you the rest of the layout. So the first thing I'm going to do is design a crossover for you. So real simple, we'll drag a piece of track on there, and it's really that simple. And that's really what I love about AnyRail, is you could just drag these pieces of track out here and connect them up. And as you see there, when the two tracks connect, that's the connection point right there. So that's how simple it is to put a crossover together. Now the next thing I'm going to do is show you how to work with flex track. So for that, I will drag a piece of my flex track out there, and the first thing I'm going to show you is how to create a curve. And you could, well, the first thing you could do is you could drag the endpoints around, but you could be very precise about it, and you can actually put the specific angle in. And what I'm going to do is a 67.5 degree angle, and I'm going to make it be a radius, a 22 degree radius curve. Now the reason I'm not making it a full 90 degrees, you'll see in a second here. But you can copy and paste things real easily. So I'll paste a copy of it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create an easement into this curve. And to do that, I'm going to use the easement tool. And you see here, there's the easement tool. So I'm going to turn this piece of track into an easement. And so to complete the 90 degree curve, I'm going to make the easement be 22.5 degrees. Oop, and I'm going to make it a right-hand easement. I'm going to make it a right-hand easement. And I'll attach it. And so what we have is an easement leading into a 22 degree curve.
That's cool.
Yeah. So the next thing that is pretty powerful here is I'm going to make this a double track main. So another powerful tool is the ability with flex track to add a parallel flex track. So I'm using the add parallel flex tool, and I just know for a fact that when you connect any two Pico turnouts to make a crossover, the distance between the rails is going to, the tracks is going to be 2 inches. That's just from my experience of knowing it. So I'm going to make the distance for my parallel track be 2 inches, and I'm going to have that fall below, and there is a piece of parallel track right there. I'm going to do the same thing here with the curve and put that below as well. Connect those up. Now to save a little time, I'll just go ahead and do a few tricks here to build out the rest of the curve. There's a neat way I can flip this over. And then connect it up here, and now I've got the rest of my 180 degree curve. Save a little more time, I'll copy this and paste it over here for later. So when we finish the layout, there's a tool that lets you rotate things, so I can rotate this 90 and then 90 again. And I'll just move it up here. The next thing I'll do is add a couple of straight tracks here. Join these together. Now, again, I'm doing this all with flex track. You could use, if you're using Atlas, you might use more snap track and work with those pieces. I'm going to smooth that out. The next thing I'll do is I'll add a little siding here, just to show you something a little different. To do that, I'll use a different turnout. I'll use a shorter one. Throw in another piece of flex. Put a nice little bumper at the end because I like to do that. And I'll finish off the layout here in a second. If you guys have any questions as I do this, just go ahead and feel free to ask. I might not answer, but okay. So now we've got our basic layout in a few minutes here. It's real easy if I want to center this on the board to do it. I could just use my arrow keys, and if you see that little knob at the top, it's kind of showing me where the center of my section is there, and I've basically centered it on my board. One thing I wanted to show you a little earlier is I kind of like to have the curves rounded on my baseboard. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and round the corners and use a jigsaw to cut that later, I guess. We're going to look at this in 3D here in a second. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set my layout height to be, I guess 42 inches is a good height to run it. And then I'm going to select the track. Now, I could select an individual piece of track and raise it up, or I can use the select stretch, and that's going to select the entire connected stretch of track. And then I'm going to raise that up with the set height tool. I'm going to make it a little bit higher than the bench work, than the table, just so you can see some of the other things, because I'm going to add a quick tunnel, and then I'm going to add a bridge to our layout here. I'm going to put the tunnel right about here, and it's real simple. Up here I can actually hide the track, and that's going to sort of force it into a tunnel. And down here in this corner, I'll go ahead and I'm going to add a little bridge work. So that's our basic layout in a couple of minutes. Now, this is just the basic track view. Let me go ahead and show it to you in 3D real fast. Of all the things with AnyRail, I think the place that it could use the most improvement is in the 3D view. But here's our basic 3D view of the layout I've just created. And the reason I elevated the track was just so you could see the bridge and so forth. And there's some texture tools in here. You can add some textures real quickly. You can add some shadow effects to the picture.
Can you add roads and crossings and things like that?
You can, but it's again, it's not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah,
There's ways
yeah,
you can do it, and you know, but you really have to kind of manipulate the objects quite a bit, and you know, there might be better tools to do that with. Again, like I say, if a big weakness, it's building the 3D of the layout. But here we've got our layout. Yeah. So I've got some printouts here, and I'll show you afterwards and pass them around. Just want to make sure I covered everything I wanted to show you here. Okay, yeah, the next thing, let's take a look at the next thing here. Let's go back to the 2D view. One thing that's really powerful about AnyRail is, you know, there's different ways you can look at the work you're doing. For example, if you want to get real precise and zoom way in on your screen, well, you can do it real easily just by, well, you can just by zooming in here, or here, I'm going to show you. This is like a center line view. So now I'm looking at the center line of the track, and you can see, you know, it's just the thin line where the middle of my track will be. I could add the road bed. I could show you the sleepers. And so this is a real nice representation of it. Another tool that's pretty powerful if you're building you know, on a open grid work is this trace tool. And what this will actually do is allow me to put a little piece of like I would call it plywood, or you know, a border around it. So if you're cutting with a jigsaw and you want to just cut a piece of wood, you've got a template to do that as well. So you know, there's a lot of power in how you see it on the screen, and also how you can print this out. Some other things that I use a lot in here when I'm designing would be things like slope percentages. I could have those be displayed. I could you know, show the different height of specific sections. So everywhere there's a dot on the map, I can show the exact height, and so on and so forth. Vertical clearance is a big one if you're designing a layout. A lot of times you get these wonderful ideas of how your track is going to go, but if you don't use a tool like this, you may not have enough clearance to get the grade you want. So it's a really good way to plan before you start the work, and make sure the things you're going to do are actually going to work in reality. Another nice little thing here is if you're designing a really massive layout with lots of switchbacks and cutovers, there's a neat thing that you can click here that'll show you all the reverse loops on your layout, so you can make sure you're able to wire those properly. So it's very versatile that way. The very last thing here that I'll show you is this user object setting. What this is basically this is an international program. So I mean, users all over the world have created various buildings and scenery that you could put on your layout and represent it very exactly. So for example, I can open up I'll open up the Woodland Scenics here, and this is all downloaded with the software. It's just a list of all these different buildings that you can possibly build and buy. So I could put like the Railway Express office here, and that's the exact dimensions of the Woodland Scenics Railway Express office. Change that view back. I don't want the trace. I don't want the track back. But now I can take this and I can rotate it. I think it's 12.5 degrees is what I think that's what. Close enough. And there's my little siding with the Railway Express office on it. So why these things are important, putting the buildings and things on your design, I mean, it's important because what I can do with this now, and I think this is the real value of AnyRail, is I could actually use this for a lot of different reasons. I can print these out, and I've got samples of all these printouts up here. But for example, if I was going to just show you my overall layout, I can do a one-pager of the layout and print it out for you. Close that for now. I could fit it all to a page, or I could also select to print it in a very specific ratio. If I select 1:1 ratio, what I'm printing is basically a map that I can paste right onto my benchwork. There's actually alignment markers and page numbers, so I keep it all in order, and then I can actually just attach this on my board and use it as a template. So if you match this up with the center line, for example, it becomes very easy to lay your cork roadbed exactly to follow the radius curve you set up and build the exact easement that you planned. So it allows you to be very precise in building your layout. That said, I think someone earlier mentioned the ability to export this as either a picture, a PDF file. You can export it to the train player game and actually run trains on your layout in virtual space. Or you can even use this with JMRI and send it to Panel Pro and create a panel for your layout, so all the turnouts can be documented, and you can build it right into your JMRI on your layout with your DCC system. So in a nutshell, that's a basic overview of how I use AnyRail and what you can do with AnyRail. And if anybody would like to see any more things than that, I'd be happy to show you later. Or if you want to make a comment if we're posting this on YouTube, go ahead and make a comment about that, and we can do something else in the future.
Bill?
Yeah.
After you've designed your layout, another neat thing about AnyRail is you can print out your parts list.
Oh!
Because it keeps track of what you put on your drawing.
Yeah, and I'll show you that too. It's right here. It does it dynamically as you put the layout together. It puts your part list together. Thank you, Chuck. I actually have one printed here, and I missed that. It on my home screen. It's right here. This will tell me everything that I need to buy to build the layout I just designed. So even though there's 22 sections that I've put on here, it's telling me the minimum number of pieces of flex track I need to buy are 13. And I've got one buffer bumper, I've got two left-hand number 10-inch turnouts, and then I've got I got an SL. Oh, I bought an Electro Frog. I made a mistake. I didn't want the Electro Frog, but I've got an SLE 95 for my little siding. So yeah, you get a comprehensive parts list you can buy too. So all that, yeah. This is Bill Trail. And thanks for watching Clinic at the Club at the Elkhart Model Railroad Club. This clinic was on AnyRail. Thanks for watching.